Although variable declaration is not compulsory in VBA, it's definitely recommended that you declare all variables that you intend to use, as well as the type of data that you intend to use them for. Declaring the data type of a variable leads to clarity in your code and helps to avoid errors. In this video, we'll talk about the different data types that VBA recognizes. So let's go into the exercises folder, and in the section 3 folder, variables and constants, you'll find a file called data types. So here we have a table which just gives a breakdown of the most common types of data that you store in variables. In the top part of the table we have primitive data such as text and numbers, and in the bottom section we have some of the most popular word objects that you tend to store references to in your variables. As you can imagine, since Word is essentially a word processor, the string data type is probably the most frequently used. And in this course, we'll be using the prefix str every time we declare a string variable. A string refers to an indeterminate number of characters, so any combination of the text that you see on this page can be termed a string. Then we have whole numbers, integer and long. And the difference here is the range. So the integer data type refers to a fairly small range from minus approximately 32,000 to positive 32,000 and some change. And then the long goes from approximately minus 2 billion to approximately positive 2 billion. Then we have single and double. These are the floating point numbers, which allow numbers after the decimal point. And the main difference between them, they're both suitable for holding very large numbers. The main difference between them for most people is the accuracy that you require. So with the single data type, you have 6 decimal places of accuracy. With the double, you can have up to 14 numbers after the decimal point. For monetary values, we've then got currency. So from minus 900 trillion up to positive 900 trillion or thereabouts, and it allows up to 4 numbers after the decimal point for accuracy, although of course monetary values only normally display 2 numbers after the decimal point. In order to achieve accurate calculations, the currency type allows up to 4 numbers after the decimal point. Then we have the date type, which is used for dates and times. And then we have Boolean. And if you haven't come across the Boolean data type before, it basically stores one of 2 values, true or false. If you don't declare variables, the default data type in VBA is called a variant. And there are occasions where you will explicitly declare a variant. And basically, a variant is a wrapper mechanism rather than a data type, which enables VBA to work out and keep track of the underlying data type and convert the values in the variable appropriately. So best practice is not to use the variant unless the situation that you're working with, the type of data you're working with, is unknown or unpredictable. Stay away from the variant data type and always explicitly type your own variables by using the as keyword. Another thing to bear in mind when working with variants is that because VBA has more work to do, variants take more memory and also make programs slightly slower. We had a brief look in the last video at declaring variables for use with objects such as document, and here we've got a rundown of some of the other objects that you very frequently use in this way and store references to in your variables. And just to remind you, when you're assigning values to variables, you use the keyword let, which is optional when you're talking about data variables. So because it's optional, no one tends to use it. And you use the keyword set when assigning values to object variables. Set, however, is obligatory. In this section, I will be using let just to remind you that let is, as it were, the opposite of set, and just to get you thinking about which of the two keywords is appropriate for the variable that's being declared. So what we'll do now is just to write a macro that allows us to play with a couple of these different data types, and we'll store the macro in the Word VBA training template, but we don't have to open it directly. All we need to do is to attach the template to this document, and we can then access the modules in the template via this document. To do that, we go across to Developer, click on Document Template, and then Attach. Then we work our way to the Exercises folder, which in my case is on the desktop, and here at the bottom you'll find the Word VBA training template. Once that's been attached, if we go across to the Visual Basic Editor, you'll find that all of the modules in that template are now accessible, and we can write macros directly into the template. So here's the macro we wrote in the last video. Let's now do another one. So it's S0302, macro A, and we'll call it data types. So we'll begin by declaring a few variables. So let's say dim str title as string, dim int words as integer, dim lng characters or chars as long, dim sng average as single, and dim lng average as double. And then let's define a couple of object variables. So we'll have dim doc as document, dim tbl as table. So now let's populate these variables. So we'll say that str title will be the title at the top of this document, which we can pick up by looking at the first paragraph of the document. So for that reason, we'll need to populate our document variable first. Because it's an object, we use set doc equal to, and we could use active document, or we could refer to the document by name. To refer to the document by name, we would say documents, and then in brackets and quotes, we would put the name of the document. So I'm just going to go back to the desktop and just copy the name of the document. And now we can look inside doc or doc, because that variable name now refers specifically to that document. So we'll now use let. As I said, although it's optional, I'm going to keep using it during this section just to highlight the contrast between let and set. So str title equals doc.paragraphs 1, which means the first paragraph, of course, and then the paragraph is an object. It's not actually a string, and of course we're populating a string variable, not an object variable. So we've got to drill down inside the paragraph object to find the string which represents the text inside it. And the way to do that is to say .range.text. Then let's populate our words and characters. So we're still on data variables here, so it's going to be let again, int words, and we're looking inside doc.words, .count, and the .count property is how you actually pick up the number of items in a collection. So we've got the words collection, and .count says how many there are. We do exactly the same for characters. Let lng chars equal doc.characters.count. And now the average So we've defined SNG average and LNG average really to highlight the difference in precision between single and double. So let SNG average equal LNG cars divided by int words. And that will effectively give us the average word length. Then I can just copy that line and change that to dBl. So you've got the same calculation, but it will be interesting to look at the result that we end up in these two variables. And then finally, let's populate our table. So we're back now to a word object. So it's set tbl equal to doc.tables1, because of course we know there is only one table. And let's just do a couple of extra variables to actually hold the number of rows and columns. So dim int rows as integer, dim int cols as integer. So having populated our table variable, we can now populate the two data variables that go with the table. So let int rows equal tbl.rows.count. Let int cols equal tbl.columns.count. And that's pretty much it.